If you're looking for clinically useful insights, not wellness hype, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Rational Wellness Podcast, a podcast for functional and integrative practitioners who want to practice with greater clarity and precision. I'm Dr. Ben Weitz, and each week I sit down with the leading clinicians, researchers, and lab innovators to explore the science, lab testing, and clinical reasoning behind modern root cause medicine. This is a show focused on practical, evidence-informed insights that you can actually use in patient care. Please subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. Tell your friends and colleagues. And if you could give us a 5-star ratings and review, we would certainly appreciate it. Finally, to access the show notes and the transcript, go to my website, drweitz.com. Today on the Rational Wellness Podcast, we're diving into a hopeful and empowering conversation about brain health with our guest, Dr. Majid Fotuhi. Dr. Fotuhi is a board-certified neurologist, neuropsychiatrist, and the author of the new book, The Invincible Brain. Dr. Fotuhi has spent decades using advanced brain imaging, neuroplasticity research, and lifestyle-based interventions to help people not just slow cognitive decline, but actually reverse it. In this episode, we're going to challenge the idea that memory loss is inevitable, talk about why Alzheimer's disease is sometimes misdiagnosed, and explore how sleep, stress, exercise, nutrition can reshape the brain. If you've ever worried about your memory, brain fog, focus, or long-term cognitive health, this is an episode you don't want to miss. Dr. Fotuhi, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So what did you mean by the title of your book, The Invincible Brain? Is the brain invincible?
I think there are many things we can do to make our brain resilient against the effects of aging. Many people assume that just because they get older, everything falls apart and that the memory will fade and that they just gradually become demented. Their brain has a high degree of resilience, and there are many ways that they can make their brain invincible and stay sharp for decades to come.
Right. For years, they used to say, you have all the brain cells you're going to have, all the neurons you're going to have by a certain age. And once you get older, you just lose neurons. And we've learned that throughout your life, you're continually making new neurons, making new neuronal connections, especially if you do the right things.
Absolutely. We used to think that people die with as many neurons as they were born with, or they'll just keep losing neurons when they get older. But research has shown that human beings are capable of generating new neurons in the memory part of the brain called the hippocampus. And this neurogenesis can happen at any age. This is something that has been shown in animal studies for a long time, but in recent years, human studies have shown the birth of new neurons in the hippocampus at any age.
So what are the most powerful mechanisms that drive this neurogenesis?
There are several things people can do to increase neurogenesis in their hippocampus. The best way to do that is exercise. I'm baffled as to why physical exercise will have anything to do with the brain and generating new neurons in the brain. But we know for a fact that when people increase their fitness, they create more neurons in their brain. And the mechanism may be the generation of BDNF. When you exercise, you increase levels of BDNF in your muscles. BDNF is an example of a myokine, hormones released from muscles. And that BDNF has a nurturing mechanism in the brain, and it can help with both the generation of new neurons and maturation of new neurons. So these stem cells can actually turn into mature, high-functioning neurons.
And
of course, when you exercise, you increase blood flow to the brain and you reduce inflammation, both of which can also provide an environment for new neurons to grow and blossom.
Are there certain forms of exercise you think are most effective for brain health?
That's a difficult question to answer because there's mixed results. We definitely know that when you increase your VO2 max, when you increase your stamina, you increase the number of mitochondria everywhere in the body and in your brain. And when you have more mitochondria, you have more ATP, which means there's more energy for brain cells to work. So I think as long as you're getting to the point of huffing and puffing, you will create new neurons. I usually do a combination of both. I usually do like an hour of stationary bike, 45 minutes of weightlifting. I don't think it's a good idea to just focus on one and not the other. The benefits seem to be complementary. You definitely want muscle. It's amazing that muscle mass actually helps with the health of the brain cells. And it's definitely the case that if you can maintain cardiovascular stamina and you increase more blood flow to the brain, that your brain also functions well. So ideally, you want to have a combination of both.
And as we age, we know the loss of muscle is a major factor. Weaker muscles leads to falls, leads to shortness of life. There's people in nursing homes that can't get out of bed simply because of sarcopenia. So, if you want to keep the housing of the brain working, then you need to keep your muscles up as you age if you want to live a longer, healthier life.
Definitely. So many studies have shown a direct link between the muscle mass and brain health.
And then
when you have muscle atrophy, that's the beginning of the end. When your muscle starts to shrink, sarcopenia, then there will be the process of shrinking that happens in the brain.
And there's something about novel activity that stimulates the brain too, right? Like doing something different in a different way that forces you to think and coordinate that has a beneficial effect on brain, right?
Exactly. The similarities between brain and muscles is amazing. Just like if you want to build muscles, you have to feel a little pain. They say no pain, no gain. Same applies to your brain. You want to feel a little frustrated. You need to find something that's a little challenging, not so challenging that you just give up and can't do it, but
right.
Challenging enough that you can push yourself. And the moment that you feel, oh, I can't get it, that's the moment that the new synapses are born. Just like when you do lift heavier weights than you can usually handle, you get new muscle fibers. Same applies in your brain. And so you want to challenge your brain as much as possible and do things that are a little outside your comfort zone. Your brain is like your muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Yeah, my latest challenge is trying to push my rating on chess.com up, and that can be very frustrating.
Yeah, so the moment that you're frustrated is the moment that there are things that are happening in your brain. So you should welcome that. So if you're not frustrated, if it's too easy, then you're not really challenging yourself. I like to learn, I know several languages, including French. So I try to, practice French for a few minutes every day as much as possible. And, I play Sudoku and I try to go to the next level. So I always try to push just one notch.
Right. And there's specific brain exercises too. People have developed programs that you can do on a computer that measure which parts of the brain need more work and can give you specific exercises to help with short-term memory or long-term memory or different aspects of cognitive health.
Absolutely. Just like when you go to a gym and you can choose to work on your biceps or triceps, or you can work on your core and your legs, you can choose which part of the brain you want to strengthen. You can work on your memory, your attention, your concentration, your executive function, your processing speed, your problem solving. There is a menu of things that you can work on. And when you do these brain game apps, they give you options. They want to work on your memory, on your processing speed, on your attention, and you pick whichever area of the brain that you want to work on. And if you keep working on it, you will find that they will get easier and that you can advance in those brain games.
Do you have a favorite brain game app that you like?
I actually like Lumosity. I think the interaction and the games they have are well explained and they're inviting. There are also a few other ones. There's Brain
Brain
HQ,
HQ, yeah.
Elevate, and Peak. And I think the best way to challenge your brain is to do a hobby that you enjoy. Like if you learn how to fish, if you learn how to dance, if you learn how to crochet, if you learn how to improve your photography skills, all of those things are learning. You don't have to necessarily sit in front of a computer and do these brain games. The advantage of those brain games and apps is that you can be selective. You can pick area of attention versus concentration versus memory and so forth. But you want to have fun doing it. So I recommend doing something you enjoy. Like I enjoy dancing. And when I take dance lessons, I have to keep track of the steps. It involves attention to which step comes which after which step. And I also have to be mindful of my body, of my partner's body. And this is also exercise. So my recommendation is to pick something you enjoy, and that will mean that you're more likely to continue doing it. If you dread doing these kind of brain games, don't waste your time. Pick something you like. In my book, I have a list of like 50 things that you can consider doing in terms of brainstorming to find something that you enjoy. Same goes with the exercise. You need to pick an exercise you actually enjoy. If you don't like running, don't go running. Go rowing or swimming. You don't like swimming, you don't like those kind of things, go for a hike. You go rock climbing, go play ping pong, play tennis, play pickleball. Pick something you actually enjoy, and that will help you stick with it. And the same applies to brain games and brain challenges. Pick brain challenging things that you actually enjoy.
When it comes to dementia and brain decline, the most common condition we always hear about is Alzheimer's, but you say that Alzheimer's is frequently overdiagnosed. Can you explain why that is?
Yes, that is a major public health issue we have these days, and that's an overdiagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. See, there are two sets of things that happens in the brain with aging. There are these things called amyloid plaques and tau tangles. These proteins aggregate, and when they aggregate, they become like a piece of gum. And that causes inflammation and that causes brain shrinkage. With early onset Alzheimer's disease, patients have mostly these plaques and tangles, which shrinks their brain and makes them become demented. But in late life Alzheimer's disease, the most common form of Alzheimer's disease, patients have two basket of things: these plaques and tangles, as well as inflammation, reduced blood flow, and reduce the natural rinsing and cleaning that happens in the brain. These things can also cause what's called as a leaky brain. The blood vessels can erode, and the content of the blood can actually seep into the brain tissue, which is a horrible thing for neurons. Neurons are very sensitive, and they can't tolerate to have like red blood cells and cytokines and things around them. So if you look at an 80-year-old brain, you see at least 7 different pathological things. You see plaques and tangles, and then you see evidence of a leaky brain. You see evidence of small strokes. You see evidence of thickened blood vessels and narrowed blood vessels. And you also see collections of other proteins that are associated with aging. These are things that you see, for example, in Parkinson's disease called synuclein or Lewy body particles. And there's something called TDP43 and other forms of tau. So an 80-year-old brain has a whole lot of things. One set of things are plaques and tangles, and another set of things are all these things I just listed. When you go to a doctor and you have cognitive problems, they just label you with this plaques and tangle part of the condition. They label you with Alzheimer's disease. But each person is different. Like I may have in my brain at the age of 80, 20% of these plaques and tangles and 80% of these other things. It's never the case that an 80-year-old has only plaques and tangles and nothing else. Never. It just doesn't happen. In all cases of late life cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease, patients have what I call a soup of problems. However, we're calling that soup with only those two ingredients, the plaques and tangles. And this is not just a nomenclature problem. When you tell somebody they have Alzheimer's disease, you're implying that they're doomed to die in a miserable way because there's no cure for Alzheimer's disease, and this is the end. They're going to live and die in a nursing home. But if you call it cognitive decline or cognitive impairment, you just call it mild, moderate, or severe cognitive impairment, which is what it is. And then look at the treatable components and treat the treatable components. For example, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, insomnia, sleep apnea, poor diet are all factors that contribute this other bag of things that we were talking about. And if you address those, you can heal the brain. And I mean this at the most scientific way. I'm not just calling it a healing mechanisms, because I've seen it in my own practice. What I did in 2012, 2013 was, after having read all this scientific literature and having published several review articles about how we are overdiagnosing Alzheimer's, I said, listen, if this is really the case, and you get a bunch of people in their 70s or early 80s, and you treat the treatable components of their dementia, they should get better, right? So this was the hypothesis that I decided to check. I put together this multidisciplinary program that addresses the treatable components and focuses on 5 pillars of brain health: exercise, sleep, diet, stress reduction, and brain training. And so we had these elderly men and women who came to our clinic twice a week, and they work with our brain coaches who coach them on how to improve their lifestyle. And also I treated the treatable components. So if somebody has sleep apnea, I put them on treatment for sleep apnea. If they had depression, I addressed the depression. If they had high blood pressure, I made sure that it was controlled. If they had diabetes, I made sure it was controlled. So I worked on the medical part of things, and my staff worked on lifestyle things. And we did standard, validated cognitive testing and brain MRI at the beginning, 6 weeks and 12 weeks. And what we saw was jaw-dropping. These people who were told they have Alzheimer's disease, they had a condition called mild cognitive impairment, early stage of Alzheimer's disease, all improved. 84% of them had statistically significant improvements in objective cognitive tests. It wasn't that they just told us they felt better. They all said that. But when we put them on in front of computers and did testing on them, they had improved. 84% of them had a statistically significant improvements. And the brain MRIs showed that more than half of them had increased the volume of hippocampus by 1 to 3%, which is equivalent to a brain that's 1 to 3 years younger. We published those results in the Journal of Prevention of Alzheimer's Disease. So in short, we do disservice to our elderly men and women who have cognitive decline. We often put the label of Alzheimer's disease on them and just park them in a nursing home waiting for them to die. And that's unfortunate, because almost more than 90% of them have so many treatable components, and addressing those does make a difference, and people can see results in a matter of weeks to months, not years. You definitely see results in 3 months, and we definitely see results in 6 months.
So I want to stay on this plaque topic. So first, I want you to comment on the fact that probably the biggest scandal that we've ever seen in medical research has happened in the research related to amyloid, with the falsification of diagrams in the landmark study published in 2006 that showed that Alzheimer's is caused by amyloid plaque, that they falsified those images.
Yes, there were some falsification of data in amyloid research. But to be fair, not all of the amyloid research and amyloid cascade hypothesis was based on those papers which were doctored.
But billions and maybe hundreds of billions of dollars of research trying to develop drugs to reduce amyloid as a way to potentially cure Alzheimer's has gone down that path and basically have been a dismal failure.
I think the problem in this field has been an overemphasis on amyloid. It's not to say that amyloid has no role at all. I wouldn't want to have a brain full of amyloid.
Right.
I think, to put things in perspective, amyloid is similar to cholesterol in cardiovascular disease.
Right. I agree.
If you have high cholesterol, it's not a good thing. But in order for you to have a heart attack, high cholesterol alone is not the culprit. And some people even question that if cholesterol plays any role at all.
Yes.
So cholesterol has some role. I wouldn't want to have high cholesterol levels. However, in order for someone to have a heart attack, they need to have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, sedentary lifestyle, stress, and all that other things.
Well, having high cholesterol, the main reason why it's a problem is if it forms plaque in the artery walls. And in order for the cholesterol to form plaques in the arteries, there has to be inflammation, oxidation, toxins, etc. And that's really one of the keys. And it's same thing with the brain. We now know that there's pathogens that enter the brain, including microbes and bacteria and viruses, and we have toxins. And that isn't it the case that the amyloid is partially a response to trying to actually protect the brain? It has an antimicrobial effect. It has a inflammation reduction effect. And don't we need to focus on some of these factors that lead to the problems leading to the amyloid? And if we did that, simply eliminating the amyloid, it would be a totally different story.
You're right. You're right. Now, the story amyloid is complicated. Of fairness, it's complicated. I don't think that there are some people. The
body's complicated.
Who intentionally are, lying, although I can't be sure. But I know that amyloid has some physiological roles. And like right now, I have amyloid in my synapses that have a role in synaptic transmission inside my brain, and they're okay. The problem with amyloid, and then, there's evidence that amyloid has antimicrobial benefits, that its response to the problem is not the problem. Sometimes when I teach, I talk about how amyloid could be like an ambulances that arrive at the scene of a fire. And so if you have too many amyloids, it's like if you have thousands of ambulances showing up for one fire, then the ambulance becomes a problem itself, even though initially had some beneficial role. And so, of fairness, amyloid is really complicated. But one thing is for sure, it's not the simple story that for no reason your amyloid levels go up, you get Alzheimer's disease, and you're doomed. That storyline is called the amyloid cascade hypothesis that has dominated the field of Alzheimer's disease for the past 40 years. And unfortunately, it's not the case. It's not that simple that you get amyloid out of nowhere and that causes tau, and then the brain shrinks and you get Alzheimer's disease and you're going to die. And the solution for that is drugs that reduce amyloid. Now, to prove that this hypothesis is not correct is that new drugs have been finally successful in reducing amyloid in the brain. I remember 1980s, there was a new drug called 15792 that had just come to the market to reduce amyloid. And many of the patients who received that drug died of swelling in the brain. And since then, at least 100 clinical trials have looked at the role of amyloid in the brain, minimum 100. These are randomized controlled trials, and all of them failed. But because there was such determination on behalf of pharmaceutical companies, and I give them credit for that, to be so persistent, finally, 2-3 drugs showed that patients did not die. And if you catch people who have small bleeds early, then you prevent from the bleeding that happens in a lot of patients. So these days are new drugs called lecanemab and donanemab, which do reduce amyloid. However, even though they eliminate more than 80% of the amyloid in the brain, and I must say, I can't believe how effective they are. It's like getting an eraser and cleaning all the amyloid in the brain. So if amyloid were the real problem, you would think that the people will perk up and
right, but the patients normally don't get better with these drugs.
But the patients don't get better with drugs, which proves that amyloid is not the main culprit. Now, patients get less worse. The clinical trials showed that, if a person, instead of going down by 10 points,
they decline at a slower rate. So they'll spend more time in a nursing home.
But and that decline, that the difference is so subtle that neither the patients nor the caregivers can tell. But to put this in perspective, there have also been randomized controlled trials for patients who have diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment or early stages of Alzheimer's disease, same patient population that received the drugs. And I actually did the research myself, where I compared the benefits of the drugs versus the lifestyle programs. And the lifestyle intervention programs, and there are 5 that I found that have done randomized controlled trials and use the same cognitive tests as the clinical trials for drugs. So it's comparing apple to apple. It's not like comparing different results. They use both something called ADAS-Cog, a cognitive testing that takes about an hour and was used in both of these drugs. And the clinical trials for multimodal lifestyle interventions appear to be far more effective than the drugs. The drugs slow the rate of decline. These programs that combine diet, exercise, cognitive training actually improve cognitive function. And that's a big difference. There's a difference in that patients actually are one notch better. It's not like they decline, but they decline a little less. They actually improve. And all the 5 clinical trials that use this outcome measure showed the same thing.
I've really been enjoying this discussion, but I just want to take a few minutes to tell you about a product that I'm very excited about. Imagine a device that can help you manage stress, improve your sleep, and boost your focus, all without any effort on your part. The Apollo Wearable is designed to do just that. Created by neuroscientists and physicians, this innovative device uses gentle vibrations to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, helping you feel calmer, more focused, and better rested. Among the compelling reasons to use the Apollo Wearable are that users experience a 40% reduction in stress and anxiety. Patients feel that they can sleep. Their sleep improves up to additional 30 minutes of sleep per night. It helps you to boost your focus and concentration. And it's scientifically backed. And the best part is you can get all these benefits with a special $40 discount by using the promo code Weitz, Weitz, my last name, at checkout to enjoy these savings. So go to Apollo Neuro and use the promo code Weitz today. And now back to our discussion. What do you think about the functional medicine, precision medicine approach of Dr. Bredesen, who's now been documenting this in research studies, and he has his first randomized trial that is soon going to be published using that sort of approach, and he's shown reversal of cognitive decline, improvements in MRIs and cognitive testing as well.
Yes, I saw the results, and I think he's done a great job of showing the benefits of personalized medicine. His results are similar to these other randomized controlled trials I told you about, which is when you do combine diet, exercise, brain training, with reducing factors that can contribute to brain decline, such as infections and toxins, you do see results. The beauty of our brain is that it has a high degree of malleability. It's a beautiful thing. Like our brain is not a computer that just gets old and rusty with aging. Our brain's like a flower. And if you take care of it, it blossoms. And if you keep maintaining it, it continues to blossom and it doesn't necessarily decline. If you go from 40 to 50 to 60, you can maintain and grow a beautiful brain just like you can maintain and grow a beautiful garden. And the details are important. And I think that's why it's important to personalize the intervention. It's not enough to tell people, hey, exercise, eat well, and don't stress. That is true, but every person is unique. For some people, diet is a major factor. For some people, the sedentary lifestyle is a factor. And if somebody has sedentary lifestyle, it's possible that they have sleep apnea that makes them tired. So they're a victim. They're not just lazy. They don't have the energy and they can't do it. Not that they don't want to, they just don't have the energy. Therefore, it's important to understand individual patient and personalize interventions for them. That's why our brain coaching was so successful, because we didn't tell people, okay, follow these 5 pillars of brain health and come back 3 months from now. We worked with them twice a week for 6 weeks. And every week, every time we saw them, we checked on how they had complied with the things they had said they would. For example, they would say walk 15 minutes a day. And so they came back, we asked them, did you walk 15 minutes a day? In a nice way. And we encouraged them to walk 20 minutes the following week. And I think that was the beauty of our program. We were able to use the art of behavioral modification to get people to go over the hump. And in our experience, when people started to change, then they will continue to change on their own. The most difficult part was that initial inertia to get started.
So let's go through a few of these different lifestyle factors. Why don't we talk a little bit about diet? And diet is obviously very controversial. It's like talking about politics. What a healthy diet to one person is an unhealthy diet to someone else. But what do you think are some of the most important factors in a brain healthy diet?
I think there are things that nobody would argue. There is a large controversial part of diet and nutrition, definitely. But I think there are 3 things that every person agrees on. And I have never heard anyone challenge what I'm about to say. Number 1 is highly processed food are bad for you.
Right.
Nobody ever said, no, that's wrong. I think there is unanimous agreement that highly processed food is not food. We shouldn't call them food. It's junk.
Agreed.
It's trash. It's like getting trash and add spices to it to taste good and then give it to people as food.
Yeah.
I think it's horrible what happens there.
Just put the right amount of fat, sugar, and salt, and you hit the bliss point, and everybody wants to eat it no matter what it's made of.
Exactly. The second thing is that I think everybody agrees that trans fats are bad for you. Things that companies put in like donuts and cookies and things that increase the half-life of products staying on shelves for a longer period of time, they're bad. And I think there's nobody who says, you know what, there's actually some research that shows trans fats are good for you. I think there's unanimous agreement that trans fats are bad for you, period. And the third thing that is bad for you is things that spike your sugar levels. Things that increase hyperglycemia quickly are bad for you. Right. Again, things like sodas and ice cream and cookies, donuts, those things spike your sugar and eventually lead to insulin resistance, and they're bad for you. So highly processed food high in trans fats, and sugary food are absolutely bad for you. Now, if you just avoid those things, you're free to eat anything else. My attitude is don't eat those things and you're free to eat whatever else you do, because I know that the vegan diet has a lot of benefits. It reduces risk of heart attacks and it's really good for you. And I wouldn't be able to do it because I want to enjoy eating a variety of things. I'm not a carnivore, but I do want to eat fish, salmon, or eat meat once or twice a week. And I eat, salmon once or twice a week. And I eat lots of fruits and vegetables. So I follow a Mediterranean diet, but I have nothing against people who really believe in a keto diet, like Dr. Bredesen does, and recommend it and pursue it. I love eating blueberries. And frankly, I don't want to live 2 years extra if I can't have my blueberries. I want to have quality of life. I want to enjoy my day-to-day life uh, for years to come. I don't want to have just living longer. I want to have good quality years and enjoyment of life. And I believe that if you eliminate those three things I mentioned, there's not much left to eat. So you're good to go.
Okay.
I think natural sources are best, and I know again that there is inflammation associated with some grains, and some people are very sensitive to eating grains. I had many patients who had migraine, and we eliminated diet, and their migraine got better. I know many neurological conditions, so epilepsy, seizures, patients do really well on a keto diet, and I know the vegan diet's good, and I haven't been really convinced with what is the best diet. So the diet that I eat is a Mediterranean diet.
And really, I think from my perspective in the functional medicine world, you've got to do some testing to see how your body is responding to that diet. So you might eat a diet that you think is going to be good for your blood sugar, and maybe in your case, it's not for whatever reason. So I think it's beneficial if you can follow a nutritional approach and then do some testing to see how it's working for you.
I agree. Yeah, I think doing continuous glucose monitoring is a good idea.
Right.
I think it's eye-opening when you eat something that you think is great for you. Like I love watermelon. I love the taste of it, especially a cold watermelon on a hot summer day. I can finish a whole bowl for you. But little I knew that it can actually increase my sugar levels quite quickly.
Right.
Damn it, I wish I didn't know.
Yeah, no, that's a great tool, is continuous glucose monitoring.
Yeah. So I think it's great if you can work with someone who's knowledgeable. We need to emphasize personalized medicine. We are all unique in our ways. There's some general things that are good for all of us. However, we are unique in our sensitivity to environment. We are unique in our sensitivity to food, and we are unique in how we respond to our environment. So, ideally, you really need to work with someone who's really knowledgeable about functional medicine and can help you to optimize your health.
So sleep is super important. We know during sleep, one of the things that happens is that the brain detoxes. It's through the glymphatic system. So can you talk about the importance of getting good quality sleep for brain health?
Sleep is not a passive process. It's not like you go to sleep and you just wake up and it was just a rest period. During sleep, a lot of dynamic things are going on, the most important of which is the rinsing and cleaning of the brain. Imagine if the trash will not get collected in New York for a week. What a mess it will be. And our brain is no different. There are there are trillions of chemical processes that happens every day in our brain. These chemical processes have byproducts, and these byproducts are things that need to be eliminated and removed from our brain. It's like a factory that generates byproducts that needs to be removed and taken away. And this process happens mostly during deep sleep at night. Now, why that is, we don't know. There are some hypotheses as to why this rinsing is mostly happening during deep sleep, but it is what it is. And it has been established, it has been shown scientifically to be the case. So the way it works is that with the pulsation of the arteries in our neck, there are small little arteries in our brain that little pulsate. And around the arteries, this space around it, sleep-like, there's a fluid called CSF. And so with each pulsation, the CSF gets pushed, it gets pumped on this side. And there's on the venous side, there's a perivascular space. Then this fluid gets collected from there. So it gets from here, and the brain tissue in between gets rinsed with each pulse. And again, this is more effective during deep sleep. So when you don't get your deep sleep, this process doesn't happen. The trash accumulates. And when the trash accumulates, it generates more inflammation. And one of the trash that accumulates is the amyloid. And so one of the problems with poor sleep is high levels of amyloid in the brain. And research studies have shown that if you have insomnia, which means sleeping fewer than 6 hours a night for 1 or 2 years, your brain is okay. Your brain heals, recovers, and you're okay. But if you've had insomnia for 25 years, your brain, and especially the hippocampus, becomes half its original size. And the amyloid levels are much higher. So it's a no-brainer that you must sleep at night. You really need to make sleep a priority. Unfortunately, a lot of people say, nobody sleeps well. I'm like everybody else. No, you need to make sleep a high priority. The problem with the sleep is that you can't just do it. With exercise, you can just get up and go. But if you can't fall asleep, you can't really force yourself. And I do not recommend sleeping medications at all. You need to prepare your mind and put it in the state which then you can fall asleep. However, there are many ways you could do it. And these days, there's no shortage of information on how to do it. There are things like following sleep hygiene, making sure the room is quiet and dark, make sure the bed is comfortable, make sure that there are no other things in the bedroom is quiet, no TV, no exercise machines, and read before you go to sleep. Don't spend too much time on social media. These are some common recommendations. However, if somebody has too much anxiety that prevents them from sleep, then they need to address that before they can sleep well.
And what is the caution about sleep medications that affects the way the brain normally works during sleep?
Yes, I really avoid prescribing sleeping medications because they change the architecture of sleep and they're very habit forming. And the last thing you want is to be addicted to like Ambien or these sleeping medications, because you get to a point of not being able to sleep on your own. I only prescribe these medications maybe for a week in someone who, for example, had concussion, had not slept for a long time, and they really need to be knocked out for a week or so. I would prescribe it. Other than that, I think herbal tea is a good thing. You can use melatonin occasionally, Benadryl occasionally. Magnesium is actually good. Bananas, there's some things that help, like a bowl of yogurt, cherries. There are some food that can help you get to the mood to fall asleep. Kiwis, bananas, and magnesium supplements also help. In general, I think it's better to do slow breathing exercises, like breathe slowly for 10 minutes and count your breath, or do meditation, or read a book, a good old book. It really puts you to sleep.
Not on your phone, a paper book.
Yeah, actually,
because you want to avoid that blue light, right?
Exactly.
Because that inhibits the melatonin secretion.
Yes, I think it's best to read a good old book.
We need to bring back book reading for sure.
It's, I think, coming back because more people appreciate the joy of holding a book in your hand and actually flipping through pages.
What do you think about some of the recent blood tests, like the p-tau 217, as an indicator of risk of Alzheimer's?
I think they're a very important part of evaluating someone who has cognitive decline. And if you have high levels of p-tau 217, it's not a good thing. It's a bad. It's like, do a blood test and you have high cholesterol. You can check your amyloid ratio, 42/40, and you can measure levels of tau 217, keeping in mind that these are only giving you information about this bag of amyloid plaques and tau tangles, and they don't tell you about the bag of all of the other things.
Right.
And therefore, if you have high level of amyloid in your brain or high tau, it doesn't mean it's the end of you. You have to realize that we don't have markers for these other things. We do. For example, the brain MRI can show significant atrophy. The MRI can show white
And
matter
this is an
hyperintensities.
MRI with volumetrics, correct?
And the MRI with volumetrics can actually give you the size of the hippocampus. And there are also new MRIs that can measure the spaces. Remember I told that perivascular space? When the rinsing doesn't happen, the fluid backs up in those perivascular spaces, the sleeves that I was telling you about. And you can see the MRI as enlarged spaces. So, and there's also ultrasound that can be done to measure the velocity of the blood flow, which is a measure of.
You mean in the carotids? Yeah.
In the carotids. So I think having blood tests for amyloid and tau is an indication of some part of pathology of brain, but it's an incomplete picture. And I think it's not fair to do the test on people and tell them that you're going to get Alzheimer's disease. There are many people who have high levels of amyloid and tau who never develop Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
And when you tell that to experts who promote these, they say, well, if they live long enough, they will. Well, that doesn't work. I mean, you can say if they live to 120 years old, they will. But, there was a study called the NUN study. The NUN study was to look at elderly women who were living in monasteries and monitor them year after year with cognitive testing and looking at their lives. And they had all agreed to donate their brain after they passed away, so researchers could look at their brain. When researchers looked at their brain, they were shocked because many of the sisters who were fully functioning during their life, even till the very last year of their life, they were driving, teaching, crocheting, participating in community activities, had level 6 Alzheimer's disease. The Alzheimer's grading goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is the worst case. It's like your brain is ridden with plaques and tangles. It's like the ultimate case. They had stage 6 Alzheimer's pathology in their brain, yet they were living full lives. There was no evidence of problems with them when they were alive, even a year before they passed away. But then they said, so why? Why did some of the sisters with such high degree of amyloid and tau did not have symptoms, whereas others did? And so when they look, comparison was that the other group that did have symptoms were the sisters who had other pathologies, such as small strokes. So if they had plaques and tangles by themselves, they wouldn't get a stroke. If they had plaques, tangles, and little strokes, then they had symptoms. And I think the same is applying these days. I wouldn't want to know my tau level, frankly, because it would add stress to me if I knew my tau levels were high. I'm already doing everything anyway.
Right.
So my recommendation and the recommendation of the American Academy of Neurology is that these tests should be done only in people who have cognitive deficits. If you're forgetting your keys and you're worried about Alzheimer's disease, you should not do these tests, because if they're positive, then you're just going to have a lot of anxiety for many years to come.
And as far as cognitive testing, which cognitive test do you prefer? Do you like the MoCA test? Do you use CNS vital signs? Is it better to use a combination of tests?
These days, there are at least 50 different versions of cognitive tests. Some cognitive tests are paper and pencil, like the MoCA or Mental State Examination Score. Others are computer-based, like CNS Vitals. And some of them are half an hour, some of them 3 hours. Sometimes you can do cognitive testing for 2 days. I think you need to work with your doctor and find a local place where they do cognitive testing. Usually you want a cognitive test that takes at least an hour and to give a full picture. These tests, these cognitive evaluations, measure only certain domains of brain functions. I think it's important to keep in mind that they measure attention, concentration, processing speed, executive function, problem solving. For example, they do not measure your emotional intelligence. You may be a great hands-on person who fixes everything in the garage or in the house, and yet would do really poorly. You could be a very successful businessman and would do poorly on these tests. And of course, level of education makes a difference. However, these tests, they do give a big picture of where you are with some common cognitive domains. In our practice, we use CNS vitals for a lot of our patients, and it was adequate in combination with me spending an hour talking to the patient. Let me tell you something happened recently. A patient came to see me saying that the neurologist told her the husband is okay. He has only some cognitive problems for his age. He's 55 years old, mechanic. And he had done cognitive testing for 4 or 5 hours and had done poorly on it. But the person who did the cognitive testing said that person did not speak English well, so this was not valid. And the neurologist didn't actually spend time with the patient, just looked at the report, and the bottom said that there are some abnormalities, but they're not valid because patient does not speak English well. So I saw the patient, just, the wife said, could you please see the patient? And I did. And I asked him, like, how, just talk to him a little bit. Asked him to look at my watch and tell me what time it is. He couldn't tell me. He couldn't read a clock. I said, can you draw a clock? And put the hands of a clock to be 7:25. Actually, here, it just happened. And he couldn't. He couldn't. So I said, listen, why don't I draw a circle for you? And then you can, okay, so here.
And by the way, that's like, say, part of the MoCA test, right? To be able to do that.
See, so he couldn't put the 12. He didn't. He just put up to 9, 10. And when he looked at it, he realized he couldn't tell there was something wrong with it. And I said, okay, well, let's do it again. He did it again. He couldn't do it. So I put the circle. I said, here, put the hands of a clock. I drew the bottom circle for him. He couldn't. And asked him to just 5 things. I said, listen, I'm going to give you 5 things to remember. And I made him a list of 5 things. He couldn't remember even one. And a neurologist had seen this patient and told patient, don't worry about it. This is just age related. I was shocked. I was just shocked. And so unfortunately, not everybody takes the time to take care of patients. Cognitive testings is very helpful. I think the standardized cognitive testings are good, but there's no placement for a neurologist, an expert who would talk to the patient, because a person may do poorly because they're depressed. A person with depression will do poorly on this test. And so you have to put these cognitive tests in the context. I often talk about the similarity of taking care of patients with heart disease versus brain disease. A cardiologist would obtain a panel blood test, not just cholesterol. They would check for, they would triglyceride, they would check for LFTs, they look at for kidney function, liver function, thyroid levels, B12, vitamin D, the whole blood test. Then they may recommend a stress test, echocardiogram, and then they talk to you. They obtain a history. Like, how do you get short of breath when you go up the stairs? How much exercise do you do? Do you smoke? And once they have all this information, then they can tell the patient what the problem is and what the treatment is.
You're right talking now, about the ideal medical exam. Unfortunately, in the system we have, where doctors are often limited to very short amounts of time with patients, we often don't see such thorough workups.
Yes, but I think that's the way to do it. I think where we are in the field is that these days these blood tests have become available. So a doctor may just do the blood test and do some cognitive testing and just tell a person they have Alzheimer's disease based on those limited partial information, and recommend that the patient receive these drugs, which is unfortunate because if the problem was depression, these drugs are not going to address the depression. For example, a 75-year-old with cognitive problems will repeat himself, is confused sometimes, and they live alone. You put that same person to live in the house with children and their grandchildren. The same person blossoms. The same person all of a sudden remembers things, goes out, laughs, has fun. You take a 75-year-old who has hearing problems and, do this talk with them, and they really can't hear, so they withdraw themselves from social gatherings and they're alone more often, and that limits their brain stimulation. And after a year or two, they may get the diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment. You give them a hearing aid, and so many other things reverses. So many things reverses. I think it's a horrible thing that we don't have a protocol to address these things. In my book, I have summarized all my experience of 30 years of doing these things into a protocol, what I call a brain portfolio. I have a list of 8 different subsections of things that need to be done in order to have personalized evaluation. And once people do those things, it becomes clear as to which areas they need to focus on. The most important thing I want people to know is this: cognitive decline has many different causes, most of which are treatable. If you're forgetting things, if you have repeated yourself often, if you sent an email and then you totally forgot that you had sent an email, or you said something in a meeting and somebody said you said that and you don't remember having said that, don't panic. It's not Alzheimer's disease. It's a list of 20 things that could be causing those things. And all of them are treatable. If you're a middle-aged person who has these kind of symptoms, you should not be thinking about Alzheimer's disease as the cause of your problems. You should really look into hopefully working with someone who's an expert in your field, or read the chapter in my book about all the things that can potentially cause cognitive decline and have a positive attitude toward it. The beauty of the brain is that it has a high degree of malleability. It can change. And you can take advantage of that and make your brain to be in good shape.
Can you tell us about a recent case of a patient who did well with your program?
Oh, thousands of patients. So one patient was, for example, a 78-year-old retired woman who was brought by her sister. The sister said, Carol has been sitting at home in front of a TV. In fact, the TV is watching her because she doesn't do anything. For a year, every day, she just sits in front of the TV. That's all she does. She doesn't talk to anyone. She doesn't walk anywhere. She just sits there. She can eat, but she does manage. And the sister wanted me to confirm a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease so that she can sell Carol's house and pay for her to go to the nursing home. And I thought, wait a minute, why is this lady doing these things? Why is she quiet? Why is she sitting down all the time? And I decided to do my evaluation. So it turned out that she had diabetes that was out of control. She had depression. She had back pain, and the doctor had given pain medications, and she had still had back pain. So she had received gabapentin, which is very sedating, and benzodiazepines, which are very sedating. And so these medications were really contributing to her lack of movements. That's why she was sitting all the time. So I tapered medications, I treated her sleep apnea, I treated her diabetes, and she started working with our staff. I never forget the first day she came. She was this beautiful African-American woman wearing a blue suit on a wheelchair. And I remember looking at her, she was looking like this. And then by the time she had done the program for 6 weeks, she was walking to our office by herself. She had stopped being on a wheelchair. She was walking 5-10 minutes a day. And she was actually talking to people. She was smiling. And she was actually a feisty woman. She was full of life. By the time she finished the program, she was looking for a job. She was engaged in her church. She had turnaround, totally turnaround. She was
That's
a brand
great
new
to hear
woman.
that.
Yeah. And then I had done MRI at her brain before and after, and a significant increase in the volume of her hippocampus. Now, she was very interesting. She came to see me every 3 months after she finished our program per protocol. So 3 months later, she was actually sad. I said, what happened? She said, oh, my husband died. And I said, I'm so sorry. Then she came back 3 months later. She was unusually happy. I said, Carol, what's going on? You're giggling. What's going on? She says, Doc, there was this boy in my high school who I had a crush on. And at the time, I didn't tell him anything because, I was a woman, I was a girl. And then I got married and he got married. But since my husband died, I just was curious where he was. So I looked him up, and it turned out that his wife had died. So I called him, and he said that he always loved me and he was shy to tell me. So they decided to get together, and they were like teenagers dating each other. And she was full of life,
That's
giggling,
great.
cheerful. And then And then she said, Dr. Fotuhi, can you do MRI to see what happened to my brain? From 0 to 3 months, she has significant increase. She wanted to know if the hippocampus had gone back down again. And what the MRI showed was that her hippocampus had grown 1% since she had finished our program, because she was active, she was doing things in the church, she was doing everything most days, she was exercising, eating right. So we published the results of our study that evaluated 129 similar patients with a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment. And we saw that 84% of our patients improved, and that the MRI showed that there was a 1 to 3% growth in the volume of the hippocampus in 12 weeks.
That's great. Okay, so final thoughts, and how can people find out about your book and your programs?
Yes, I am on Instagram, Dr._Fotuhi, Fotuhi. I also post on LinkedIn and X and YouTube. My website is drfotuhi.com, it's drfotuhi.com. And if you search the Invincible brain, I think many of these things will come up. I honestly believe that people can make their brain invincible and resilient to the effects of aging. And I really hope that people change their attitude about aging. People need to appreciate that just because they get to their 50s and 60s and 70s, life does not need to be downhill. You can have a full life, be happy, do 1,000 things, and move on with life. It's true that you may not run as fast as you were in your 20s, or that you may not be as quick as when you were in your 20s, but there's no rush. Don't let that 5, 7, 8% decline tell you that you have to stop doing things, because if you have that mentality, then you expedite your decline. The less you move, the faster you will decline. The less you move, the less muscle you will have, and the faster your brain will decline. So have a positive attitude about aging, live life to the fullest, and realize that you can do whatever you want well into your 80s.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Fotuhi.
My pleasure.
Thank you for making it all the way through this episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. For those of you who enjoy listening to the Rational Wellness Podcast, I would very much appreciate it if you could go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give us a 5-star ratings and review. As you may know, I continue to accept a limited number of new patients per month for functional medicine. If you would like help overcoming a gut or other chronic health condition and want to prevent chronic problems and want to promote longevity, please call my Santa Monica Weitz Sports Chiropractic and Nutrition office at 310-395-3111, and we can set you up for a consultation for functional medicine. And I will talk to everybody next week.